and we're finally going to produce some gameplay. Let me show you what the end product is going to be after this video. This is the step 3 video, as I mentioned. I'm going to refresh the screen and you'll see my hero is in place like we had in the last video, but I can start to eat the smaller circles. And as long as I avoid the larger circles, I'm going to keep eating more and more of the smaller circles. Now eventually I will run into a larger circle, and when that happens, I display game over and I post the number of circles that I acquired. So in this case I must have acquired 16 circles. So that's our goal for this video. As of right now, this is what we have. We have our game after step 2, where we're not really having a game, it's more of a simulation. The circles are flying around and we have our hero just wandering around the canvas. Okay, so let's get to this. It turns out this isn't that bad. It's not that bad, not that hard to add. Let's get to add this functionality. Remember, we have our HTML file. We are not going to mess with that in step 3, and we're not going to mess with our CSS file either. All of our coding will take place in our script file. As you recall, I am typing this out in Visual Studio Code. I've made the font bigger so that it's hopefully easier to read in the video. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be making changes to the code as we go. So essentially right now, most of the action takes place in our draw function. Just to remind you, the draw function prints a black background to erase whatever was there before. We update the mouse's location or the hero's location based on the mouse, and then we show the hero. After that, we run through the entire array of circles and we display each one and then also update its location. Now if a circle happens to go off the canvas, we renew it in a new location so that the game constantly has, in our case I think it's 35 circles. Okay, so that's where all the action takes place. Now what we're going to want to do is add something that checks to see if our hero's circle intersects with one of the floating circles. To do that, what we're actually going to do is add a method to our hero. So I'm going to scroll past the circle object down to my hero object. You'll recall in the last video we set up the constructor function and we made a method called show, a prototype method. What I'm going to do here after the show method is I'm going to add another method, and we're going to make one that will check for a collision. And so this is going to be a prototype method, and I'm just going to call it check for collision. This is going to be a function. It will receive a parameter. What's going to happen is I'm going to send it one of the circles to see if I intersected with that circle. So this is just our hero and one circle. We see if they intersected. And so as my parameters, I'm going to call that circle that I receive circ. This is a assignment statement, so I'm going to put a semicolon after my bracket there. Now I just want to make a little note in here. This function is going to return true if we collide with a larger circle. So if we happen to hit one of the big ones, we're going to return true, and then we'll have to react to that true statement. If we collide with a small one, or we don't collide with a circle at all, then we're just going to return false. Okay, so here's the major statement. We got to do a little math here. We're going to check for a collision. And that's a decision statement, right? That's an if. We have to check the distance between the center of our hero, which is this dot x, this dot y. So remember, processing in p5.js, they have a built-in distance formula. So all we have to do is send, all we have to do is send it. Gosh darn, this thing is not cooperating at all. How about dist? There we go. The auto completion's giving me the business. I haven't mastered it yet. We just have to check the distance between our center, the center of our hero, which is this dot x comma this dot y, and the center of the circle that we received in our parameters, which is circ.x and circ.y. We check that distance, okay? Spelled that wrong, circ. Okay, circ.x, circ.y. If that distance is less than the radius of our hero plus the radius of the circle, okay? We got to add those two things together. So that's this dot d divided by 2, because d is the diameter. So the radius of our hero plus the radius of the circle. So that's circ.d divided by 2. If the distance between our two circles is less than the two radii added together, then the circles must have overlapped, and that's a collision, and we need to react to that. Let me fix this misspelling here in my comment. Okay, so if that's true, we have to do something. Otherwise, we're just going to return false. So there's no collision, and we return false. I could throw that in an else, but I don't really think it's necessary because I'm going to return true or false inside of this thing too, so I automatically get sent back no matter what. Okay, if we do have a collision, it's either going to be a bigger circle or a smaller circle. So next thing we need to do is find out what kind of a collision we have. So if this dot d, that's the size of my hero, is greater than the circ.d. In other words, if we have intersected with a smaller circle, we get to eat it. So I've got to write some code here to eat that circle. Otherwise, I've intersected with a larger circle, and if that happens, we've got bad news. Okay? So I put my frown face there. I'm going to make up a variable called game over. And I'm going to call that true when we hit a larger circle. And then I have to return true because I said if the function, if this function returns true, if we collide with a larger circle. So that's what happened. We just made up a new variable. I better set that up in my global values. So my game over variable is going to start out false, right? We're going to start out actually playing the game. The game won't be over until we crash. I'll show you where that's going to come into play in a minute, but for now, let's just put that in there, that if we intersect with a larger circle, the game's over. If we intersect with a smaller circle, something else is going to happen. This is happy time here because now we're going to increase our score. So remember, we made a variable, a property of our circles called, of our hero called circles eaten. And as soon as we intersect with a smaller circle, we have to increment that. So this dot circles, C-I-R-C-L-E-S, eaten, is going to increase by 1. So we'll plus that stinker. All right. This dot circles eaten plus, that increases our number of circles eaten. I also want to make my circle a little bigger. As we continue to eat circles, we're going to make our circle grow. So this dot D, I'm going to increase that as well. I'm going to increase my diameter by, we'll increase it by 1. So we'll do plus on that also. Once I change my diameter, I have to also update D factor, right? D factor is our scale that we're going to use to decide what size circles to create. So I have to also increment that, or I'm just going to set it equal to this dot D. We always want that equal to our current diameter. Finally, if I eat a circle, I need to take it off the screen and renew it somewhere else. So I'm going to renew the circ. Right? If I eat it, I got to take it off the screen, and then I want it to renew and pop on the screen from one of the edges. So that's what the renew function does. And finally, since we didn't lose, I'm going to return false here too. Okay, so let's double check this. We increased the circles eaten. We increased the diameter of our hero. We update D factor to the size of the diameter. We renew the circle that we ate. And then we return false so that the game knows that we're not done, that we didn't lose. That's good news. Okay. Now remember, this is just a method. We haven't actually used it yet. So where we're going to use this is up in our draw loop. We have a for loop already created in our draw loop that runs through every circle every time we update the game screen. And so all I want to do is insert in that loop a test to see if we had a collision. So after we show a circle and update its coordinates, and actually I kind of want to change the order of this. I want to update the coordinates first and then show the circle. So let's just change this. Let's do it this way. That will do the same thing that we do with the hero, right? We update its coordinates and then we show it. So we'll do it this way too. Okay, so we show the circle, and then you know what? I'm going to put that back the way it was. Let's just leave it the way it was for now. Okay, pretend I didn't say that. Okay, so after we show the circles, let's see if we intersect with our hero. So I'm going to just put a comment in here so I know what I'm doing. We're going to check collisions. Check for a collision. We're going to have an if statement. And we will call our method. So that's hero.checkForCollision. And remember, this function receives one of our circles. And we want to send it the one that we're currently examining or currently showing. So that's circles bracket C. Right? This runs through all of the circles, but the current circle is circles bracket C. We're going to check for a collision. If we get a collision, then if it's a smaller circle, our method takes care of things. If this returns false, excuse me, if this returns false, we don't want anything to happen. We just want our function to take care of it. But if it returns true, our game is over. So we need to display that screen that I showed you at the beginning of the video. We're going to set the background back to black. So we'll set a black background. I'm going to change my fill to a fancy red, and then of course you can change it to something else if you want. But I've used 255, 40, 40 for my RGB. And then I want to put some text on the screen. So I'm going to text game over. And I want that to show up in the middle of the screen, so game width divided by 2. But because I'm going to display two things on the screen, I want them spaced out. I'm actually going to put the height at 1/3 of the height, not halfway. So game height over 3. Let me show you just what that part looks like. Text is not capitalized. Make sure that's a lowercase t. Let me show you how this shows up, and then we'll put the score on the screen in a minute. And then, of course, if this happens, we want to break the program and stop the loop, right? Okay, so let me save this, and let's see what we have so far. We should be able to eat some circles. Let me refresh. We should be able to eat some. So there, I ate one. Ooh, I ate another one. Okay, I ate one, ate one, ate one. This is good. I'm eating circles. Let's try and eat a bigger one. Boom. Oops. Boom. So game over shows up. There's a couple problems. First of all, it's really small, and then my game keeps starting over on me, which is a glitch. So we got to fix that. All right, so first, let's fix the size of the font. As you recall, hopefully from other projects we've done, you can set the text size. And so what I'm going to do is up here in my setup function, I'm just going to set the text size. And I chose 50. We'll see how that works. If you don't like the 50, you can set it to a different size. I'm also going to set the alignment. Text align, I'm going to set it to center both ways. so that when I send some coordinates, I don't have to worry about how wide the text is. It'll always end up in the center. So that's our setup functions that we need to get the text showing up correctly. Let's talk about this idea about how the game ended, and then as soon as I move the mouse, it started again. So right now our draw function just keeps rolling. Just because I put this break line in, all that does is break the for loop. It does not stop the draw loop. Nothing will, right? Our draw loop repeats constantly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to encapsulate the entire draw function in an if. And I only want it to do this stuff if the game is not over. So since we have this variable game over and it's Boolean, if I put game over in there, it'll do everything if the game is over, but I want to do it if it's not over. So in JavaScript, the way you do the opposite of a variable is you put an exclamation point in front of it. So if not game over, in other words, if the game is not over, we're going to keep playing. We're going to keep drawing. And I'm putting that around all of the code in my draw loop. Now I have to fix my indenting here, otherwise I'll give myself a headache. So all of this stuff from background all the way down to that second to last closing bracket right here, that's all got a tab over one. And now you can see with my guidelines that this if takes care of that. All right? And so our program will only draw stuff if the game is not over. That's what this means right here. If the game is not over, if not game over, then all this stuff happens. So let me save this and let me show you how just improving that text and also adjusting the game over variable, things will look a little better here. So here I'm going to eat some, yeah, give me a bigger circle. There we go. So now I've got game over kind of in the center of the top third of the screen, and when I move my mouse or do anything funky, the game doesn't start over again. Right now, all it does is stop. The only way we can start the game again is by refreshing. And that's by design for today. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to put in a click to continue or a restart game thing yet. Step 3 is not about that. Okay, so I've got the game over thing going. We still need to display the score, so let's go ahead and do that. You'll remember I was typing here in my if statement. I displayed the text for game over, and then let's go ahead and display our score. So we're going to use the text command again. You can decide how you want to show this. I just put the word score in quotes, and then I leave a space, and then I want to add on to it the number of circles my hero has. So that's going to be hero.circleseaten, which is right here. So now my score is being displayed, and then you have to tell it where to display it. So I'm going to put it at game width divided by 2, so halfway over, right in the center of the screen. And then since I did 1/3 to get myself in the top half of the screen, I want to be 2/3 of the way down. I'm going to divide by 1.6 for game height. Remember, the y-axis goes opposite of our normal math class, so we don't increase this number, we actually reduce it to get to go further down the screen. Okay, so that's about 1.6. Repeating is about where we want to be, about 4/3. So I'll show you in a second that this does work. Let's just see if there's anything else we need to do here. Okay. Let's go ahead and restart this thing. We'll play for a while. I'll score some wins here by eating some of these little ones. And then boom, I crash. And it says my score is 9 and my game is over, and that's it. Nothing else happens until I refresh. Okay, so I decided as I was working on this step 3 that I was going to make a few adjustments just to how we renewed our circles. Remember, we want to keep our hero to be on a screen where about half of the circles are smaller and about half of them are larger. And so I just made an adjustment to how I set the diameter. Rather than always making it, where's my diameter line here? Rather than always making it 0.3 up to D factor, I wanted the smallest ones to grow as the hero grew. So there weren't a bunch of super small ones along with the bigger ones. So I made this a multiple of d factor also. What I said was the smallest radius that I want to have is whatever our circle is divided by 8. An eighth of our circle is the smallest we'll have. And then double our circle is the largest we'll have. So that's a random diameter there. Just a small adjustment. I think that'll improve the gameplay a little. And again, we can tweak with this as we go. That's the only change I made to our circle renew function. Let me just show you how this sort of affects the gameplay a little bit here. I'm going to restart. And let me try and just win a bunch of these suckers. So you can see as I start eating these things, my player is growing. Ooh, that one's not big enough yet. My player is going to grow. I can eat this one. I got that one. I got this one. This is like one of the YouTube shows that my son watches now where somebody else plays the game, and apparently it's exciting. I don't know. I don't get it. But you see how the circles start growing as my hero gets bigger. There's not nearly as many of the really small ones left, only the ones that maybe were still stuck on the screen. The smallest one that should be on there is an eighth of my size, and then the larger ones should keep getting larger. And that sort of keeps the proportions the same even when you're getting your circle is bigger, right? Now the constraint here is that the canvas is still the same size, so even though the circles are adjusting with each other, the space that you have to work is not. Eventually I'm going to die. In fact, I'll do it right now. So I got 48 there. Now, this is a basic game. We can actually play now, but it doesn't have a lot of features. In fact, the score doesn't even show on the canvas while we're playing. So there's a lot we can still do to this, but I wanted you to see in step 3 that we could get this thing working relatively quickly. Let me just run through quickly what we did. I made one adjustment to my global variables. In fact, let's go ahead and just, now that I've got a bunch of these suckers up here, let's just define this in human terms so that everybody knows this is our global variable section. Okay. Just adding a few extra comments in now that we're starting to get closer to an actual program. Global variable definition. Down here in our setup loop, let's just say this is our canvas setup and animation loop. Set up. So this section here has our setup function and our draw loop, right? Now, in the setup, the only change I made is I added a text size command and a text align center so that we could get the game over and the score showing in the proper location. No other changes to setup. In our draw loop, there were two major changes. We added this if statement so that we only messed with the canvas if the game wasn't over, right? If the game was over, then none of this happens. But if the game is not over, in other words, if we're still playing, then the only change we made is we added a check for the collisions. And if that check came back true, that we intersected with a larger circle, then we displayed our score and our game over message. And then, of course, we still have to check to see if the circles are off the screen, which that's not a change. We had that before. And then the major change to our hero object was we added this method which checks to see if we collided with any of the circles. We send it one circle, we check the distance between the centers, and then it's either a smaller circle, in which case we increment our score and make our hero bigger, and then of course we renew the other circle. Or if we intersected with a larger circle, we simply set game over to true and we return true. There's a couple other ways we could have handled that, but this way's fine for now. Anytime you see somebody writing code online, there's probably somebody else that can write it in a different way. So I'm not claiming this to be the best way, but it does achieve what we wanted. And then, of course, please continue to comment your code so that when a human reads it, including you in the future, you'll have some sort of idea of what you were going for when you made certain decisions. Okay? All right, so that is step 3. We have a playable game. Let's get it working, and we'll spend a little time seeing who can get the highest score. All right, good work, and Of course, you'll see me in class. Take care.